Hey guys, alright, today we are watching Life in Nazi Germany, Animated History by Armchair Historian. What to expect? What I am going to predict as to what to expect is possibly something similar to that, Life in Nazi-occupied France. But actually, I'm going to say probably a greater emphasis on possibly the lesser-known resistance movements that occurred in Germany, like actual German resistance movements, as well as probably, the Jewish the concentration camps, and possibly Armchair Historian questioning this idea and leaving it up to the audience to decide whether or not the villages close to the camps and the German population knew about what was going on in the concentration camps. But it is totally understandable, especially at around the time when I believe he uploaded this video, to avoid that question, as it is a tough question to ask, to ponder, and also is not friendly towards advertisers. So I understand if he avoids that question. So let's just go ahead, jump right into Life in Nazi Germany.
Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, the Armchair Historian. Today's video, what was life like in Nazi Germany? When one tries to imagine what life was like for the average German between the years of 1933 and 1945, what comes to mind? Many would likely envision it as a drab, nightmarish, totalitarian dystopia, and in many ways this was true, certainly for the sections of society that the Nazis firmly repressed. But how much different was life like for the Germans who lived up to Hitler's standards?
Alright, for the I shouldn't say regular Germans. For the Germans that were not put into the Hitler's minorities, the Jews, Roma, homosexuals, all of those people the people that did not meet those criteria, I guess. What was life like for those German citizens? So I guess it would be, let's say I'm a German citizen, since I am straight, I am not Jewish. I know for a fact my family does not have Jewish ancestors, as we've done. My family has done research into our ancestry because we're American, and I guess we're interested in that sort of thing, which is strange, I guess, to the rest of the world, or at least I have been told by European foreign exchange students a few years ago. But yeah. My family is pretty much Germanic. So, what would life have been like, say, if I lived then? I am going to guess probably my standard of living probably would go up before the war. 1933 to 1938 probably saw a huge increase in the average German's prosperity of life. Quality of life, because not only with that whole when Hitler explicitly started really targeting the Jews in Kristallnacht, because of the Jews getting removed in such a way, that opens up jobs, which means for those that are not part of that marginalized community, they have more job opportunities. Sadly when people are targeted in such a way, other people benefit from it, because that's kind of how the world works at times, and it's sad, but yeah. So I'm guessing quality of life increased for Hitler's idea of what a German should be.
Before we address the life of the average citizen, we must first understand what life was like for minorities, and as can be imagined, the rights of these groups were...
Great, yes. I like how he is taking the time and first explaining what life was like for those that were pushed into a marginalized community.
Essentially eliminated. Almost as soon as Hitler took power in 1933, Jewish civil servants such as teachers, professors, engineers, and administrators were excluded from government employment. Within the first few months of Hitler's election, the Nazis used their newly acquired power to orchestrate what would be known as Kristallnacht, or Crystal Night, in which thousands of Jewish businesses, homes...
You know what I've always found a bit interesting is this. Obviously, the brain drain would affect Germany in the 40s. But yeah, they didn't... Despite being this way towards the Jews and Slavs, you know, with like Einstein fleeing to the United States as well as others, the brain drain that this kind of thing would affect, like would cause, didn't really affect German technology until the 40s when they really started to need it because, well, the Americans and the other allies received, or on the receiving end of the fleeing peoples that Germany was, you know, segregating against. But even in the 30s, throughout the 30s, they still managed to stay on top of technology for the most part.
And synagogues were burned or otherwise vandalized, their owners beaten and arrested. By 1941, almost all of Germany's remaining Jewish population, which 10 years earlier had numbered over 500,000, were imprisoned in concentration camps. The Nazis embarked on an ideologically fueled campaign.
One of the things when this idea is, I guess, brought up, or this situation is brought up when the Nazis took control and started to arrest the Jews in large numbers like this, I am surprised. Like, it's you know, we want to say that we would do different. We would, if we were to see our neighbors being arrested like this, you know, we want to believe that we would do the right thing. But then we look back at this time period, and we see that there was no real open resistance against the Reich, against the Nazi Party in Germany. Now, certainly there was opposition, but it was very quiet, and it isn't really remembered in the history books. It's just I guess it's kind of a sad thought.
Against virtually all minorities and marginal
This is a
groups of
tough
society,
one to commentate
gypsies, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and ethnic Slavs. One of the methods used in this campaign was forced sterilization. In the words of Richard Evans in his book, The Third Reich in Power, in essence, the Nazi regime was using sterilization to crush those areas of society that did not conform to the Nazi ideal.
Can't really conform to a Nazi ideal when the Nazis don't give you the chance to conform, because they already view you as a marginalized community just based off of the religion you follow or the culture that you were born into. So, like, I feel like that's a little bit of an unfair statement. You know, like, you can't, like, let's say I was born in Poland. I'm a Pole. I'm Polish. I'm not Jewish, but I'm still Polish. I'm still part of a marginalized community because I belong to the Slavic ethnic group. I did nothing. It's not through my actions that I'm a Slav. I was just born into it, you know? And yet to the Nazis, I'm still inferior just because of the state of the place I was born. I can't conform to that society when they don't, you know, let you. When they already see you as inferior.
Another particular aspect of this campaign that has been written about repeatedly is the Nazis' Eugenics Program, which sought to systematically breed out those the Nazis deemed Untermenschen, or subhuman. For example, state-appointed physicians were authorized and instructed to euthanize children that were considered by the Nazis to be unworthy of life. Up to 100,000 Germans, including 20,000 children, were euthanized between 1939 and 1940.
What's interesting is that's never talked about, really. You don't really hear much about this eugenics program. You know, you hear about, and rightfully so, you hear about the slaughtering of the Jewish population, as well as the discrimination and slaughtering of the Slavic peoples. But actual Germans, German Germans, you know, not Jewish Germans, not Slavic Germans, just regular Germans, were killed because they had certain traits that made them Untermenschen, or they had traits that made them, I guess, in the Nazi point of view, undesirable for life. It's just, it's such a terrifying thing to think about. How this happened.
Nazis persecuted, let's examine how life was for everyday citizens. While the role of men in society under the new regime was not much different from that of the previous one, women experienced a variety of new expectations. The Nazis introduced what they saw as traditional German values for women, which included modesty, dedication to Christian, in this case Nazified values, and most importantly, the production of children, which the Nazis viewed as a crucial component of their plans to expand the German nation. In fact, a civil award, the German Mother's Cross, was established and given to women who bore at least 4 children. In schools, students were taught a curriculum that was designed to encourage discrimination and discourage racial mixing.
I'm curious, was there a significant tax cut? Was there a significant tax relief to the mothers that, you know, the families that bore 4 German children? You know, like, I feel like there had to be more than just a medal awarded to the women that bore 4 children.
To quote Richard Evans again, teachers and pupils greet each other at the beginning and end of every lesson with the Nazi salute. The pupils listened to major political speeches on the radio.
Yes,
in the school
propaganda
hall.
was everywhere.
As we mentioned, the primary objective of
pretty much
the Nazi
brainwashing.
school system was to ensure that the party's ideology became ingrained in the minds of students, something which was intended to produce loyal soldiers for future wars. Dating all the way back from 1920
and to provide a populace that won't fight against you.
To the Hitler Youth, and later on its female branch, the League of German Girls, was meant to prepare boys for military service and girls for motherhood. These organizations were incredibly popular in Germany, and by 1939, over 90% of Germany's children were part of the Hitler Youth.
Jeez.
During this time, even more innocuous institutions of German society began to take a National Socialist slant, as can be seen with the Positive Christianity movement, which was a state-sponsored program to unite all of Germany's Protestant churches into one national church that would legitimize and support the Nazi agenda. Government, under the direction of propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels,
and to also bring the church under the control of the state and not under the control of the papacy in Rome.
Distributed millions of inexpensive.
The German Nazi Party wanted full control over everything inside the country. And established church, you know, especially the Catholic Church, is not controlled by the state. It is controlled by the papacy in the Vatican City. And that's something the Germans really did not like.
Radios
or well, the
to
Nazis
people
did not like.
in
I
order
shouldn't
to
say
make sure
Germans.
that important political messages could reach them. These measures, however, often did not produce the desired effect, as most people were only interested in carrying on daily life as it had existed before. Recognizing that most of the German people could not be fully indoctrinated, the government enforced its ideal German state through legislation. For example, it was required for both men and women aged 19 to 25 to commit a 6-month tour of public labor, in which they fulfilled the Nazi concept of a social labor force. Women were then allowed to return home, but men were conscripted into the Wehrmacht, or German military. This provided a steady source of manpower for the ultra-militaristic Nazi state. The Nazis also introduced the Volkswagen, or People's Car, which was intended to provide each German household with a vehicle, as part of Hitler's campaign to motorize Germany. In regards to economics, the Great Depression was taking a disastrous toll on the German people before the Nazis were elected. By 1933, unemployment stood at 35%, and inflation was rampant. Naturally, the Nazis promised to improve the state of the German economy, something which earned them many votes in the election of 1933.
As typically happens if you can make the people believe that you will ensure a greater quality of life, especially after an economic disaster, you will typically
Their
win.
first priority was to reduce the dismal amount of unemployment in Germany by initiating large public works projects, such as the construction of canals and the Autobahn, or highway. Hitler boasted his success in spite of the fact that many of the employment statistics that were used excluded significant portions of the population, such as Jews and soldiers. Though the Nazis' economic reforms have generally been considered effective, it took years for the unemployment rate to actually drop to stable levels. Despite promising peace both during and after his election, Hitler would once again involve the German people in a large-scale war. As the need for resources to power the German military grew larger and larger, more countries were subjected to Hitler's conquest, something which escalated the war onto a global scale. As the conflict raged on, it quickly became apparent to most observers, even those within Germany, that the idealistic utopia that the Nazis hoped for would never come to fruition. The sheer number of casualties that the war produced, especially on the Eastern Front, was overwhelming. When defeat finally did arrive, it would take nearly a half-century before life would return to normal, as the country was divided between the democratic West and the communist East, until they were reunited in 1990. One of the scientists who fled Germany in the 19th.
What to add? Well, my prediction was pretty much wrong. He didn't really talk about that much about... He did talk a significant amount about the life in Nazi Germany for those that are part of that, I guess, the Nazi Untermenschen, the undesirables. He talked for a couple minutes on that, which I liked. I really liked that, and I think that was a great addition. But then when he got to the average German, he did not really talk too much about it. It was a brief mention of how they were propaganda was spewed into them, and they were pretty much essentially brainwashed into believing the state, in believing in the state. There wasn't really an answer to quality of life, if that really how that changed under Nazi Germany. Aside from it was more of the same. How was it more of the same? What was like what changed? What stayed the same? You know, I would have liked a little bit more emphasis on that, or a clearer message on that. But overall, good video. Good quality animations. It's amazing to see how far he's come. But yeah, gonna end it there for today. Remember to leave a suggestion down below as to what you would like to see me react to next. As always, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thank you.